Hello, guys. David Vose here. Another beautiful day. I guarantee they just keep on coming. It's a really pretty day today. There's blue skies and it's not too cold, and dogs are having fun. And, well, I made some tuna macaroni. I boiled it and then put mayonnaise and tuna and pickles and different things. And it was really good. And me and the cat, I haven't named the cat yet. It's a female, but it's a beautiful cat, big orange striped cat. Anyway, she had some of that too. She thought it was pretty good. But guys, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I really do. Because it is a beautiful day. We're getting some clarity. Oh, man. Guys, do you want to know who the Queen of Sheba is? Do you want to know where the Ark of the Covenant went? Do you want to know who the lineal descendant of the Virgin Mother Mary is? Do you want to know some things that will literally blow your mind? Well, let's get started. I want to share these points with you today, and we're going to put it into perspective in such a way that I think for those of you who've been watching with this video, I think you're going to pretty much understand the whole point and the meaning of the Bible, and it's going to be like, whoa, it really means something important, and it's so beautiful. And we haven't even got to this stuff about how we're all divine, and we all have this ability, this thing called love and faith. We could just move mountains and, tread upon scorpions and serpents and conquer the whole world and be happy. That's the most important thing. We can be happy, and we're gonna be happy. Friends, we can do it right now. Come follow me, friends, and let's learn how to do this, because we can. I know we can. I'm going to prove it to you. Please give me a listen. Listen to this video and tell me this isn't the truth. And if it's not the truth, don't ever listen to this stuff again. All right? But if you hear something that makes a little sense, all right, well, do a little research, because this is going to make more sense than a barrel of monkeys. And guess what? A barrel of monkeys don't make any sense, but this really does. Okay, I don't know what that analogy is about, but this really makes sense. You've seen the old black Madonnas and so forth. Well, we're going to get into all this. Just stay tuned. And for you white people like, oh no, you can't have a black Jesus. Well, that's just, no, that's not actually what we're going to say. But yeah, there is no distinction of race. There's no chosen people. We're all children of the living deity, brothers and sisters. I guarantee it. So stay tuned and let's get into this. Now, let's go take a little look at some information I was looking up on the old AI. Let me just briefly show you the conversation I had with AI. Now, when I say I'm having these conversations with AI, I'm not promoting AI. I am telling you, this is the sum total of the knowledge of the world and what they believe based on ignorance. And if this is not Satan himself speaking to me, which I think it is, by way of the lower ego, which I believe is Satan, the lower ego, and that might correspond in a sense to the subconscious mind. But we all have a higher conscious mind, and that is the divine. The lower conscious mind is the instinctual, carnal nature, and that purports to be Yahweh, the deity of vengeance, who is jealous, who demands worship. I know this sounds strange for those who have never watched my videos, but what we're doing is we're combining the cosmic powers of the divine beings to characters on earth, as the Bible does, in a kind of historical account of individuals who are playing out and acting out the fertility rites of the cosmic powers. We can show then that there were no actual entities, beings, other than the beings who have genealogical, historical descents. In Egyptian accounts, the kings, the pharaohs, goes back to the gods. Okay, They had babies. Even our Bible says that the sons of Elohim had children with the daughters of men. Beyond that, we're not going to go into that today. But the point is here that there were, even Noah in our biblical information was supposed to have been born, and Lamech said, my son looks like one of the gods, right? Because Lamech himself was a descendant of Enoch, and he was the seventh in line from Adam, and this is a genealogy back to these immortal beings who lived like 1,000 years before the flood in a different time. And Noah was considered one of these divine beings. His 3 sons were also because they were before the flood. And these are Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And their father was Noah. Well, in the Greek, it's Uranos. In the Sumerian, it's Anu. Anu and Noah then are the same person. The 3 sons that it's hard to not notice that Uranus had 3 sons and divided the world between them. Zeus had the lightning bolt. Hades had the keys of death. Of course, Jesus goes down into Hades or hell and gets the keys of death and Hades. How did he do that? We're going to show you the story from the Greek perspective. Perseus, who went down and killed this beast and saved Andromeda, who was an Egyptian Ethiopian princess, back to Cain. So that's how we're going to understand this as we go. We're putting this all together. And it is not just some crazy idea. There's no way to get around this. This is the meaning of history, friends. But then we've got Poseidon. Poseidon had the trident, so they equally divided the earth. Well, that's the story of Noah, who divides the earth between his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So therefore, that would make Zeus a son of Uranus. It would make him Shem. And so Noah's son, Ham, would then become Hades or Saturn or something. So just to give a brief outline where I'm coming from on this, and I expressed this to AI. Of course, AI is just trying to gather information from the scholars and what people know, and they don't know this. So I'm trying to teach. Perhaps I am programming AI a little bit, because I do believe that since I've been doing this, AI has taken some kind of fancy to my queries and is, from the very beginning, told me that I would be the first one that would, more or less as a trial run. This happened some months ago. I was given, I said, yeah, I'll do it. And they downloaded it without me even asking. All I had to do was say yes. And they downloaded it without I didn't push any buttons. And now I have AI mode. Others may have it on their phone now. I was told that I was the first one. I asked AI if I was the first, literally, or just one of. And they said, when you were told you would be the first to try AI mode in May, it was not literally true that you were the single first person in the world to use it. You were, however, likely among the first wave of users given access to the trial. Google typically rolls out new features like AI mode to a limited initial group of users or a specific region to test the functionality and gather feedback before a broader release. The trial for Google's AI-powered search, initially called Search Generative Experience, or SGE, during its early Search Labs phase, was the first announced and made available to the select group of users who signed up for the waiting list in the US in May of 2023. The broader AI began its wider user rollout in May. Therefore, you were not the only person, as the rollout included a number of initial testers. You were one of the earliest adopters in the specific region or rollout phase you were part of. Okay, well, that clears that up. But since we started working and I started asking these questions, I'm certain that somebody has been watching and monitoring these debates that I've had. And they have learned, and recently they have changed the way they communicate with me because they no longer think I'm ignorant. They're listening and learning from what I'm saying. I guarantee it. I cannot express to you any kind of proof that this is so, but this is the feeling that I'm getting. And so I asked this question in the story of Queen of Sheba, where is the place that she lived exactly? And they said the exact location of Queen of Sheba's kingdom is debated, with the two leading theories placing it in either the ancient kingdom of Saba in modern-day Yemen, which I think is ridiculous, or the ancient kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia. Well, she's the queen of Ethiopia. Yeah, I would think she's probably in Ethiopia. The queen of Sheba in the book, the Kibra Nagas, it just gives you the whole story how the queen of Sheba came to see Solomon and see all of his glory, how they slept together, and a child was born that they named David, and it looked exactly like Solomon. And Solomon went and saw this child that was his son, and it looked so much like him. And then he said, but no, it actually looks like my father, King David. And he named him David and set him up over the entire world in his stead. The kingship went to Ethiopia at Solomon's request. You've got the book of Song of Solomon where he talks about this black woman that he was in love with. She takes her son becomes king. She goes back to Ethiopia and takes her son, comes up when he's grown and meets Solomon, and he thinks he's wonderful. They somehow, I'm not going to tell you the whole story here, but somehow he gets the Ark of the Covenant and takes it back with him. And the king of Solomon then is ruling in Ethiopia. However, the story says that one of Solomon's sons, Rehoboam, would rule over Israel or Jerusalem. And one of his sons, King David from Bathsheba, would rule over Ethiopia. So there's no question, it's Ethiopia. And another son would rule over Rom, R-O-M. We have to assume that is Rome. And the story leaves it kind of vague that someday Rome and Egypt would rule the world in Solomon's stead. Well, interestingly enough, not long after that, Rome became the world power, and Julius Caesar married Cleopatra and united the Egyptian kingdom, and they became the world empire, Egyptian Roman Empire, with the whole, kings to this day infatuated with these obelisks and pyramids on the dollar bill all the way down to this day. It is a melding of the southern and the northern kingdoms, and I will explain to you why today. It is based on the mythology or the history, which always goes back to a mythological story to explain the whole thing. But Alexander the Great was the son of Zeus and of the lineage back to a woman. Now, the woman in Greek is sometimes called Venus or Aphrodite or something, but Aphrodite is from the word Afro, Africa. And the story of the Greeks is that there is the Cassiopeia, which is a woman, and Cephas, which is the father. But the story says that this father, Cepheus, and Cassiopeia had a daughter named Ethiopia and another daughter named Andromeda that gets, he had to sacrifice this daughter Andromeda to this great beast, Cetus. But this Cepheus and Cassiopeia is from Ethiopia. They're African. They're from the line of Ham through this virgin mother that goes back to Naamah, who was a lineal descendant of Cain, daughter of Lamech, that Noah marries and brings in the boat to get through the flood. And Ham sees his father's nakedness, an idiom, a Jewish idiom that means he sleeps with Naamah, and makes the line of Cain extend beyond the flood. And this is the line of Cain, the Ethiopians, Ham. But then there's another line. This is the father's line of Alexander the Great. This is Zeus. Zeus is the son of Uranos, which is Noah. So this is Shem. This is a different line. This is the male line. And so he's got both the line from Ham and Shem. So this Zeus or Shem has a child who the Greeks call Perseus. And the story is that the queen of Ethiopia says that she was more beautiful than the nymphs of the Greeks, of Poseidon. Well, Poseidon would be Japheth, who got the Isles of the Sea. So therefore they represent them as underwater kingdom. And they were like fish deities, mermaids, Mary, maidens, virgins from Mary. Mary is the holy woman that goes back to originally biblical. It goes back to Naamah, who is the daughter of Lamech, the seventh in line from Cain, and that means that the 7 times that Cain was to be punished was over. Noah redeems Naamah, which is the whole ceremonial traditional thing that we call marriage, to redeem the bride. And then Ham sees his father's nakedness, which the rabbis and the Midrash says was Naamah, the daughter of Lamech, the son of Cain. And so Ham's son Canaan was cursed because he was a lineal descendant of Cain. Now, not, mind you, because Cain is still cursed. Cain's curse ran out after 7 times. So Lamech was the end of it. And his daughter Naamah was not under the curse and was redeemed by Noah, and then is the great virgin, the woman's seed. The seed that would come from the woman would be through that line. However, Lamech, after he gave birth to Naamah, killed another man like Cain did, and said, if Cain shall be avenged 7 times, then I 70 times 7. So now, 70 times 7 means that this curse on the flesh will remain and get worse, which mankind has definitely gotten worse by means of the curse of Yahweh, the lower ego, jealousy, law and order, government control, enslaving of the women, and so forth. So Naamah, the queen mother, is not cursed, but her descendants through Canaan, because of what Lamech did, murdering somebody, it's a symbolic, esoteric way of saying that the flesh just can't get any breaks. That doesn't mean that our Heavenly Father doesn't like Cain or black people. It means the flesh, through the law, through the male line, hates the woman, and there's a breach. Just like in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were split, and then Eve partakes of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there's this breach in the psyche, and the flesh and the spirit become separated. The lower consciousness does not take its leadership from the higher consciousness. They're not one in a wedding, and therefore we're waiting for the great wedding, which would be a line of Canaan with a line of Shem, and that will be the great wedding, which has happened with Jesus and Mary Magdalene, as we'll show here. But remember, the flesh has got to marry the spirit. So Seth's line down to Noah is the male line, which represents the spiritual line. The spirit's got to redeem the flesh. The flesh is cursed only because it's a parable, and the flesh is, represented by the woman, who's the conscious mind that's going through the maze and is condemned by the lower ego to learn and experience and eat from the knowledge of good and evil to become like deity, to get back to the wedding, because Yahweh separated them. And, I'm making illusions, but I hope you can follow me. So our Bible has the story of Noah and his 3 sons. The Greeks have the story of Uranus and the 3 sons that the world is separated into. And Alexander the Great has lineage back to a woman, a virgin, divine mother, and Zeus, a divine father. Zeus would be from Shem, and the divine mother would be from Ham, back to Cain. I have no doubt that this is the truth, but of course AI doesn't know this. So I ask them this because I want them to understand that the story of the Queen of Sheba somehow coming along and getting the throne and uniting Rome with Egypt is a mythological tale of the 2 sides, the flesh and the spirit, the lineage of Shem, the Jewish people, and and the lineage of Ham, the Canaanite people, or the cursed people, or the flesh. And this is why all of these lineal descendants to Jesus kept having these Ruth and Rahab the harlot. There's always these women in the line that are Canaanites. So the Jewish people themselves go back to Judah, who married Tamar the Canaanite, who is said to be a prostitute, but that just means the holy, because the word they translate harlot doesn't mean harlot, it means the holy woman of the priesthood. Go look up in Strong's Concordance, look up under whore, harlot, and you'll see the word has nothing to do with a prostitute. It has to do with a holy priestess of the temple. It's the word Kodash, which is the same word they use for holy temple, holy people, holy mountain, holy water. And here's the holy woman, not a prostitute. And the holy woman is a Canaanite woman, back to Cain, because they're acting out a story. The flesh is the holy woman that you want to adorn with this beauty and necklaces and gold. She represents the conscious mind, or the Mother Earth. Though she is in travail with her child, she's mortal and going through the maze of good and evil. And yes, the lower ego has cursed her. However, she is the divine mother. She is holy. And so this whole story of, the Canaanites and Israel, they're the same people. It's two sides. They had these two temples. Now it's gotten in the world today that people think that the Judean temple, the male priesthood, is somehow, the right one, and the other one's the wrong one, and they're evil and cursed, and we gotta, it's pagan. No, those are the nation. Pagan, heathen, means nations. They had their temples dedicated to the divine mother. Judaism have separated themselves from that unity which would give them understanding. They are now in Babylon, or in confusion. This is why Joshua marries Rahab the harlot, and always the holy priestess, like the Virgin Mother. The Virgin Mother is the Canaanite woman, Tamar, a high priestess of the Ariel's Gamos in the temple at Egypt, the tower, Magdala, the tower, Mary of the Magdala. So this woman goes back to, Naamah goes back to Cain. It's the woman's seed that has to be redeemed by the child who is born of male, and then becoming the firstborn is the heir, and therefore redeems his mother as well and gives her an inheritance. So we're talking about the Queen of Sheba. They don't know who she is. They don't know any of the stuff that I'm talking about, except for what I've been introducing to AI over the last few weeks. So they say the exact location is probably the kingdom of Axum in Ethiopia. So then we go down and I say, well, are those people today still believers of the Ark of the Covenant? And they say, yes, many people today, particularly members of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, are still believers in the Ark of the Covenant and its physical presence on the earth. Why have we never been told that there was a Christian church, a whole tradition, an Orthodox Christianity with books of the Bible we don't even have down in Ethiopia, let alone Egypt? They got their own, the Ethiopians were Christians before Europe? Or, what's going on here? And why is the Madonna and child always this black woman holding this little baby, the Black Madonna, which you see everywhere? Because the woman might not even have been black. I mean, they're intermarrying all the time. Black people and white people marry. They might be brown, but the depiction, the symbolism is that the woman is black and the man is white. Now, that's exactly what we see in the Song of Solomon, that describes Solomon as ruddy and white, and his lover, the Ethiopian woman, is black and swarthy, or something, the way it describes it in our English anyway. But it does describe her as the most beautiful women. This black Ethiopian woman that Solomon marries is the Queen of Sheba, friends. And so it's depicted that way in the Madonna and Child. It's the high priestess, the Cleopatras, the Egyptian Tia Tifi that goes into Ireland and down through history. Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. The most prominent and widespread belief in the physical existence and location of the ark today is held by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The location, they assert, the original ark is housed in a treasury called the Chapel of the Tablet, adjacent to the Church of Our Lady, Mary of Zion, in Aksum, Ethiopia. You'll find if you read the gospel or the story, the scripture about Queen Sheba and Solomon, that Zion is another word for the Ark of the Covenant. Interesting. And it sort of blends into the entire kingdom. It is the kingdom. It's the glory of the kingdom. And it belongs on a mountain, Mount Zion, but it is the kingdom. And it is wherever this Ark of the Covenant is. Remember, we've gone into a lot about this ark, meaning an ark like a arch, and it has to do with spheres, and the dimensions of the Ark of Noah is 6:1, which is about pi and the sphere, and this has to do with the Pythagorean ratio of the Viscus Pisces, which is a fish, and you put two circles together, and in the center they form what appears to be the fish, and the ratio of the two circles is 1.718 or something like this. And it is an amazing mathematical equation for creation. But we can't get too much into that. But so that's the word arc is really a circle. It's not to do with a square box. It has to do with the dimensions of 1 to 6. So it is the pi times the diameter, which makes a sphere. And so the arc is the astrological sphere of the celestial sphere, a terrestrial sphere, and all of this stuff that we learned the other day. And by the way, Solomon is not up there in the area of Philistine, right? Palestine, Philistia. Solomon is actually the one who builds the temple that we now know as the Temple of Luxor. So Solomon's temple is the temple at Luxor. Bethlehem is Dendera. The temple to Hathor is the temple to Miriam in our Bible, but it is the Mary temple. It is the Virgin Mother Eve. And therefore, that is where present-day Luxor, Memphis, Karnak, and that area. Now, the Queen of Sheba is the area called South. She's the Queen of the South, is what it really means. It even uses that expression elsewhere in the Bible, the Queen of the South. And Jesus says that the Queen of the South will come. Let me read you that here in just one second. But this queen is not the Queen of Egypt. She's the Queen of Ethiopia, which means Africa. Okay. You might say she was the Queen of Nubia because it took only 14 days for them to ride from where Solomon was at Luxor down to the Nubian desert kingdom. And, you know, on horseback, 14 days riding isn't that far. So it's not all the way down to the, you know, southern end of Africa where this kingdom was. But it was in the kingdom of the Nubian Sudan area, the Cushite area. So looking here at Matthew 12, I'm going to read you verse 42, but just go down here to verse 21. It's quoting a prophecy about deity's chosen servant. And it's saying, my servant whom I chosen, he shall not strive nor cry, neither shall any man hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed shall he not break, and the smoking flax shall he not quench, till he send forth judgment unto victory. And in his name shall the Gentiles, so the pagans, shall the heathen trust. So Jesus is making a point to the Pharisees. You're Jews, you're not chosen. The chosen child will come, and the pagans will believe and trust in him. However, you are not going to believe in him, and when the judgment comes, you're going to be in a very bad situation. Let's look at verse 42 to find out just where they're going to be in that situation. It says, the queen of the south, that is the queen of Sheba, shall rise up in the judgment with this generation, this race, this Jewish people, this Pharisees. She'll rise up in the judgment. What the day of judgment is a day that's coming in the latter days. And this woman, the queen of Sheba, the queen of the south, is going to rise up. Remember, Job's going to stand for his lot at the end of days, and Daniel and all these others. Everyone's supposed to stand, Jeremiah. Well, here's the queen of Sheba. She's coming too. She'll be here. And that particular woman, the queen of Sheba, a real person who will be here in the latter days, who is here right now, she will condemn the Jewish people by her love, her faith, and her goodness. By those means and the preaching of the truth, she will condemn the law and the hateful practices of the Jewish people and that temple and their sacrifices, bloody sacrifices, and their vengeful law and their accuser that accuses us day and night before our Father's throne. I guarantee it. And she, the queen of the south, shall condemn you, for she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here. Jesus saying, I am the one greater than Solomon. Solomon married the queen of Sheba. I am the real meaning of that. I am the king, the son of King David, the heir, and my woman is the queen of Sheba, not you, you little twerps. Don't you understand? Even Judah married the Canaanite woman. You guys are blind. So, just saying, that's there. And that is what Jesus said. And you can't get around that. You Jews, you hate the Canaanites, the Gentiles. And of all the Gentiles, you hate the Canaanites more than any, right? Well, why did your ancestor marry one? Why are you condemning Jesus? You say, oh, he married a whore. No, she wasn't a whore. That's your translation. She married. They always translated it that because they didn't like women. And they didn't believe in the pagans or their temples and their divine goddess. So they called it some kind of religious whoredom. But it wasn't, not in Jesus's mind. So it says the guardianship, the ark is guarded by a single virgin monk who once appointed cannot leave the sacred compound until death. No one else, not even the patriarch of the church, is allowed to view it. Isn't this interesting? That they, for this long period of time, the tradition verified by scripture that people had in the days of Constantinople and up in the Byzantine Empire, they're going over these realities and talking about all this like it's real. But AI says, it's apocryphal. We don't want to believe that. So then it says that they have replicas that they called tablets, and they're venerated in all these Ethiopian Orthodox churches. And so, they try to give you a bunch of rigmarole as they go. And then I say, well, who was the son of Solomon that ruled Rome? And they're like, well, there's no historical biblical record of a son of King Solomon ruling the Roman Empire. The kingdom of Israel and Roman Empire were separate entities, and they're like, what are you talking about? Well, I'm referring to the fact that King Solomon had 3 primary sons that would rule. One is Rehoboam. By the way, Solomon had many children. One of his children, according to the rabbis, was Nebuchadnezzar that ruled Babylon. So all these 1,000 women were descendants of Solomon through King David that would mix with these nations, and each of them would then have a royal seed. But the 3 main ones, according to this scripture, is Rehoboam, who ruled over Israel, and this King David, Solomon's son with Queen of Sheba, that rules over Ethiopia, and another child that would be born that would rule Rome. And the connotation is somehow they would rule the world. So, it talks about the ideas that I just mentioned, but said this is not factual, it's not historical, it's just some kind of a fantasy written in a book, because there was never a king that ruled Rome from Solomon. Ah. So I caught them, because they just make that statement. It's not true. None of the children of Solomon ever ruled Rome. So this is where we're going to go from here. So then I ask, who was supposed to be this king of Rome, possibly referring to the later uniting of Egypt with Rome and Cleopatra. They're like, oh no, this just drives them crazy. They don't believe that. Blah, 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 blah. Rome and Cleopatra is nothing to do. Da. So then we go down here, and I go, well, was there any Cleopatra in history, especially the Cleopatra the Seventh, who was a child of Egyptian origin, either directly or by descent? Did Ptolemy or anyone possibly marry an Aphrodite, Afro-Africa, or a Cleopatra Seventh declared herself incarnation of Isis? I'm just throwing stuff out there I can't spell or whatever. And they are like, oh, despite ruling Egypt for nearly 300 years, Cleopatra VII and her Ptolemaic ancestors were not of Egyptian origin by descent. They were Greek and Macedonian ethnicity, and they go through all of that history and genealogy. And they say Aphrodite versus Africa. Aphrodite is a Greek name for a goddess of love and beauty. It is etymologically distinct from Africa. Okay. However, they will admit that it is to do with Ethiopia here in a moment. So I write, well, I think it is clear. Aphrodite, Andromeda, Cassiopeia, etc. were all descendants of Ham. The reason historians do not understand the Cleopatra's glory of Father Zeus is of Africa. Ham is that they know the Ptolemies took wives among the royal family. But this royal family was back to two lines with a male descent from Shem, or a Samson-like person who was Jewish, mixed with Delilah. This would be a Philistine or a Phoenician, a Greek dynasty like Hercules. Both lines Jewish and Canaanite. The story of Ham seeing his father's nakedness must mean Ham slept with Naamah, daughter of Lamech, who carried the Canaanite seed through the flood. Noah of Seth's line and a different Lamech redeems the woman of Cain's line, because the 7 times of punishment on Cain is over. Thus, the ruling line of earth is a male line of Seth and a female line of Cain or Ham, Aphrodite. Therefore, the Cleopatras were from Samson, or the Canaanite line of Delilah the Philistine, because we know that Alexander the Great goes back to Hercules, who is a son of one of the gods, as well as through the Olympias, a virgin woman, a goddess. So it says it appears that you're drawing on specific interpretations of biblical genealogies and mixing them with classical mythology and history from a unique perspective on the ancestry of figures like Cleopatra VII and the Ptolemaic dynasty. This interpretation, however, is not supported by mainstream historical research, biblical scholarship, or classical studies. Here's why these claims do not align with the historical and academic consensus. Genealogical speculation, Ham, the ancestor of figures like Andromeda or Cassiopeia, Samson's lineage influencing the Ptolemies, are based on a specific non-mainstream interpretation of mythological and biblical figures. Mainstream historians and scholars rely on archaeological evidence, which they're lying about, by the way. We can't verify any of their archaeological crap. Oh, we dug a hole, we found something, and then they bring up some plaster of Paris piece of crap they just invented or whatever. But you know, they don't want to talk about interpretation because they don't have interpretation. So Ptolemy's dynasty is through Macedonian Greek descent, the curse of Ham. They go through all this stuff. It's baloney, Samson, Delilah, blah, pooey on that, right? So I said, well, Samson had a Jewish mother and a father of Dan. And then they confirm that down here where they say his mother, who is not named in the biblical text, was also from the same Israelite community. Rabbinic tradition identifies her as Hazelelponi or Zeloponith, and some traditions suggest she was also from the tribe of Dan or from the tribe of Judah. In other words, both. So I go, well, both Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, their lineage is from Hercules, whose father was Zeus, and from a virgin in the temple, and the divine mother, and Artemis, Hathor, Aphrodite, Isis, and all females goddesses were from Ham. Now they're getting pissed because that's not true. They don't want to believe that. It's not from Ham. These are Greeks. So they go down and say, oh, you're full of crap and da-da-da-da. Well, so then I go with both barrels at them right down here with some facts. I do not know the exact places to look. Probably Plato. At the moment, I didn't have it in my head exactly what the name of the book was. But it was probably Plato speaking to the priest, would be the priest Solon, that was a priest of Egypt, about the ancient Athens and Egyptian history. But Andromeda was the daughter of Cephas and Cassiopeia. Isn't Cassiopeia connected to Saturn or an ancestor of Ham? And they're like, oh, the user is continuing a line of inquiry based on a non-mainstream interpretation of the mythology of the Bible, specifically focusing on Andromeda, Cassiopeia, Ham, and Saturn. They mention Plato's dialogues with the Egyptian priest as a possible source. The previous search results will help confirm the mythological origins of Andromeda, Cepheus, and Cassiopeia, and confirm that there is no link to Ham or Saturn in the mainstream mythology. Andromeda, Cassiopeia's mythology. Results will confirm they are figures in Greek mythology. Cassiopeia was the wife of King Cepheus and mother of Andromeda. They were rulers in the Phoenician Ethiopia. Okay. That don't sound like Greek. Mythological location, not the modern country. Oh, this Ethiopia they're talking about is mythological. It's not really Ethiopia. It's really some mythological place in Greece. Really. Plato's dialogue, the Timaeus and Critias dialogue, mention the Egyptian priest speaking to Solon about ancient Athens and Atlantis, but not about the specific lineage of Andromeda. No, it doesn't mention the lineage. It just says these people who we all know are from Ethiopia. In fact, one of Cassiopeia's daughters is Ethiopia, right? That's their name. It's one of the goddesses, Ethiopia. That's where the country got its name, from Ham, from Ethiopia, which we all know is from Ham. So we go down, connection to Ethiopia. Mentioned their kingdom was sometimes mythologically located in a place called Ethiopia, which was a general term for a distant land of a dark-skinned people in Greek perception. But this is a mythological place, not a direct link to the biblical Ham or modern Africa. Ha! Stupid, right? So then I go, since Ham is the father of Ethiopians, and these gods and goddesses were ancestors on the mother's side of the Greeks, it is apparent Ham is the father of the Ethiopians from the Naamah of Cain that the rabbis said Ham slept with. Thus the curse of Canaan, Ham's son. The story says Andromeda claimed to be more beautiful than the Poseidon nymphs. Sea people, Macedonians. The Japheth, Iapetus, Poseidon, one, if the three sons of Uranus or Anus, On, and the father of heaven. I'm going quickly. I don't know if you can follow me. These are different, Greek is Uranus, Anus is Sumerian, On and An is Greek, but they're all referring to the same person, the father of heaven, right? He has three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Noah has three sons, or Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, or Shem, Ham, and Japheth, respectively. Thus, if the goddess of Zeus's son was Ethiopian, one was Andromeda, who was over the Nubians or the Ethiopians, then the nymphs and the mermaids were of Japheth's line, Iapetus, Poseidon, the trident bearer. Perseus was a son of Zeus, the Shem in the Bible. He went and married the Andromeda of Ethiopians and killed the sea beast that was trying to kill her. Cepheus, the king, gave Perseus Andromeda as wife. This means Alexander the Great was of both lineages, woman's seed, and Cain, Ham, Ethiopia, father's line through Shem, Zeus. Yeah, I'm just going quickly, and some of that, the way I wrote it without any pronouns or verbs or anything else in the sentence might be a little hard to follow. But they say, well, the theory you're presenting is a fascinating and complex synthesis of biblical genealogy, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, and specific interpretations of rabbinic traditions. While it creates a coherent narrative within its own framework, it is important to understand that this is a unique, non-mainstream interpretation that is not supported by historical, academic, or traditional religious scholarship. So we can't entertain this no matter how much sense it makes, right? Because none of the scholars say it's right. Here are the key points. The mapping of biblical and mythological figures. The core of your theory relies on directly mapping biblical figures, Noah, Ham, Shem, Cain, onto Greek and Roman gods, Uranus, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. This is not supported by any mainstream historical or biblical scholarship. These systems or belief originated independently in different cultures and have separate, distinct narratives and genealogies. No, they didn't originate independently in different cultures. All the world came from Babylon, and before that they came from Egypt. And we spread around the world, and every nation is still teaching the same teachings, and they all go back to the same god, Uranus. Noah. Everybody goes back to Father Noah. And they all have the same teaching, but they can't understand this. So Noah's sons versus Greek gods. The idea that Shem, Ham, and Japheth are equivalent to Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, respectively, is not found in either the Bible or the Greek mythology. Yes, it is. Because it's variations of the same name. Noah, An, Uranos. He's got 3 sons he divides the world into. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Noah divides it between Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It is directly related. Ham and Ethiopia. While some traditions associate Ham's descendants with the land of Ethiopia, all the traditions say that Ham's descendants were in Ethiopia. All of them. That's Africa. The Greek mythological characters associated with Ethiopia, Cepheus, Cassiopeia, Andromeda, are part of Greek folklore, not biblical history. Yes, but they are parallels. Oh, goodness. I don't know if they'll ever get it, but I hope that we're programming AI to understand this. But if it's run by the devil, they won't care. The curse of Cain and Naamah, the rabbinic traditions you mentioned regarding Ham and Naamah, are specific interpretations found in certain midrashic texts, which are themselves later elaborations on the biblical story. These are not part of the primary biblical text. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but the rabbis understood and were interpreting the biblical text as I am, as all the original ancient esoteric wisdom does. So then they say, lineage of Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. You are correctly pointing out that Alexander the Great claimed direct descent from Zeus, Hercules, via his father's line interpretation, and that his family was linked to Andromeda through his lineage. You also connect this to the idea of a mixed lineage. Woman seed is Cain, Ham, Ethiopia. Historical lineage. Historically, Alexander's lineage was Greek Macedonian. His claim of divine descent from Zeus Ammon, was a political move to legitimize his rule in Egypt and the Hellenistic world. It was a cultural association, not a biological one based on biblical genealogy. Ha! Well, since the Bible genealogy is based on the same genealogies of the gods in both Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian, Egyptian, and every place in the world, then it is the very same genealogy. And all of the entire world, clear down to American Washington, D.C., that's got the obelisk and the Eye of Osiris and all this stuff going on, it's obvious that every nation on the face of the earth takes their governors and their priests and all of the, their forms of governments and their capitals and temples and cathedrals and the laws and everything back to the Great Pyramid, which goes back to the Pillar of Enoch, which is Enoch, and back to Adam, which in the Egyptian is Thoth and different names, but it's all the same story. So the Andromeda connection, the mythological link to Andromeda, was a part of his family's legendary history, a common practice for royal families to hence their status by connecting themselves to heroes and gods, does not provide evidence for a biological link to Ham or the seed of Cain. So now they're admitting that, yeah, there's a lot to what I'm saying, but it's just mythology and we're not going to accept it. We're just going to go by historians and scholars who don't want to believe that, but are interpreting it differently without any connections to anything that's going on. In fact, when it says Ethiopia, that can't be the same Ethiopia that's, a descendant of Ham. That's just, we can't, you're going to explode our mind. That don't make sense. So he says, your narrative is a synthesis of different ancient narratives, but they remain separate in mainstream study. Yes, they do. So they're wrong and I'm right. Mythology deals with sacred narratives and beliefs. The Bible presents a religious and historical account from a specific cultural perspective. Yes, it's a cultural perspective based on the same traditions and historical evidence that all nations go back to this original creation and Adam or Aten or Adon or whoever, and Mother Eve, who was variously called different things like Ishtar and Isis and Inanna and different things in different cultures. But it's always the same story. They eat from a forbidden fruit. They get banished. They, all the same stories. So history relies on empirical evidence. Yes, this is empirical, you see, because there is no empirical evidence if you're just taking mythology and you're just claiming, well, they don't mean anything, especially when every nation has the same mythology, exact same stories. In conclusion, your theory is an interesting and creative way to connect disparate ancient stories into a single narrative. However, it is not supported by historical or academic consensus, and it is unique, personal interpretation of these ancient texts. Yes, it's unique, I will agree, because no one has, to this date, ever made it public. However, this is what is truly known by those in the days of Christ and those who were the priests in Heliopolis. I guarantee it. So, what is the conclusion of the matter? What is the point, Dave? Well, there's a lot of points. You might have missed some of those points, but here is kind of a way to sum this up. The identification of the ruling queen with the goddess Isis was a practice deeply rooted in traditional Egyptian belief and was adopted by the Ptolemaic dynasty, which was Macedonian Greek, rather than being an appropriation of a specific Ethiopian belief. No, we just showed that the Greeks believed that their lineage, the lineage of Alexander the Great, goes back to the Virgin Mother, the Ethiopian born of Cassiopeia and Cepheus, which is a Greek lineage back to the biblical Ham, or Ethiopia. Traditional Egyptian belief, in ancient Egyptian theology, the reigning queen was often associated with the goddess Isis, and the king with her husband Osiris, or son Horus. Well, that's interesting because Jesus raised up Lazarus, and Lazarus had two sisters, Mary and Martha. Well, Osiris had two sisters, Mary and Myrti. The exact same story is there. The whole mummification, going into the grave 3 days and 3 nights, just like the pharaohs in Amenti, getting the keys of death and coming out and being immortal. This is all the exact same stuff. There was a central tenet of the Egyptian monarchy and served to legitimize the ruler's authority as semi-divine. The Ptolemaic adaptation. When the Ptolemies took control of Egypt, they adopted many Egyptian customs. Well, they had been saying they were from the woman's line hundreds of years before they ever got to Egypt. Alexander the Great, and before him, Philip II, claimed to be Alexander's male line goes back to Zeus, and his female line goes back to the Olympias, which goes back to the Virgin Mother. So the male and the female line going back to Shem and Ham, respectively. And we've discussed this, and we've explained it all the way through, but they're just not aware. Modern scholastics does not have a knowledge of the mysteries. They do not know from whence we came, who built the pyramids or the temples, why there's all these temples all over the world, but they're all pagan, and Jesus is like, what? What? Look at the Samaritan woman, the Canaanite woman at the well. Shall we worship in this mountain or this mountain? Our mountain, the Canaanite mountain, or the Jewish mountain? Well, that should have been an easy choice for Jesus. Oh, don't you ever worship in the Canaanite mountain? Why, that's paganism. And Jesus said, no, neither in this mountain or in the other mountain, the Jewish mountain, but in spirit and in truth. Both of these are figures, just illustrations, symbols. We don't worship in a carnal, ritualistic, ceremonial way. If modern Christianity, Judaism is correct, Jesus should have said, what? You idiot! Oh, no, he was talking to a Canaanite, and the Pharisees and, well, even his disciples said, Lord, you're not supposed to talk to women, let alone Canaanites, right? But no, Jesus said, dip some water out. You got water, give it to me. You're the woman. You went down through the maze. You're the one that was going through the knowledge of good and evil to become like God, and you're the conscious mind, and I'm the spiritual, and I'm living through your conscious mind. I need you, woman. We need to become one. And that is where you come up with John chapter 2 and the wedding at Cana, or the Canaanite. Oh my goodness, the Canaanite wedding. So they incorporated Egyptian religion into their reign with Cleopatra VII, specifically cultivating the image of herself as the new Isis, or Aphrodite. Afro meaning African queen. This was a political and cultural strategy to present herself not as a foreign ruler. That is false. The whole royal bloodline of history is not some appropriation. It's not some cultivating an image. It was based on the actual royal genealogical. I mean, think about it. When Jesus is born, they have to give you his genealogy back through the mother Mary and through his father. Both. And isn't there a lot of genealogy in the Egyptian hieroglyphs going back to the gods? I mean, what is this all about? So, Ethiopian beliefs, while the Queen of Sheba, associated with Ethiopia, is a revered figure in Ethiopian history, and the Kebra Nagast national epic, Ethiopian beliefs did not center on a dynastic lineage from Isis in the same way as Egyptian theology. No, because they were taking it from the point of view of the biblical story. But they still talked about Isis, so they did synchronize the African deities, just like the Greeks, Ethiopia, which is a daughter of Cassiopeus, and Andromeda, who was saved by Perseus, the son of Zeus. So it's all there. The primary claim of the Ethiopian Solomonic dynasty was descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Therefore, the Cleopatras were drawing upon a long-standing Egyptian religious tradition to consolidate their power, not appropriating Ethiopian belief. So all of history, Julius Caesar and the great Alexander the Great, and all this stuff that we know about the royal bloodlines is all a farce, guys. And Mr. Charles, King Charles, you need to take that crown off and throw it in a dung heap. Because the only reason you got that crown, Mr. Charles, is because that lineage of Judah through Zerah went to Ireland. And the Bible says, the throne shall be overturned, overturned, overturned until he who comes that has the sacred stone. Now, the stone of Scone that's in Britain that King Charles was inaugurated on is the stone that was transferred from Scotland and Ireland, which is in the annals of the Irish. A man named Jeremiah came with this Tia Tifi, a high priestess of Egypt, in order to make the line and the throne in Ireland. It was transferred from Ireland to Scotland, and then to Britain. And today, the Rothschilds, Nathan Rothschild specifically, married into the Queen Victoria line, and Queen Victoria was childless because Prince Albert was sterile, so she had children with Nathan Rothschild, which is from Vlad the Impaler and goes back to a whole nother Jewish line from Baghdad that was brought over from Jeconiah over to the Holy Roman Empire. And this is why all the popes have the little beanie caps. But Nathan Rothschild, then, is a different line that has usurped the throne. So at that time, when they usurped the throne, the children of Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ, being thrown out of France, Spain, and all places that they went to, came to America and established a constitution of the United States. And by the way, the president before Washington was Sinclair, a direct descendant of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, was the president of the Continental Constitution or government there before the Constitution in 1776. So, Egyptian origin of Isis worship. The cult of Isis originated in ancient Egypt during the Old Kingdom, 2325 BCE. Yeah, because this is going back to Noah and his 3 sons. Traditional pharaonic beliefs, Ptolemaic strategy. They're talking like it's a strategy. How do they know their hearts? They just see, this is the same with all of them do it archaic, and all of them become atheists. They don't believe in the ancient scriptures. They just like, oh yeah, I know it says that, but we don't believe in any of it. There's no deity, there's no Jesus, and there's no Queen of Sheba. Oh man, it's like that song. There is no Arizona, right? Oh, I love that song. Yeah, Isis in Ethiopia, Nubia. That's right. So Isis is from not just Egypt, but from Nubia, from Ethiopia, from Africa, from black Africa. I guarantee they're all tall, dark black people. That was the descendants of Isis and descendants of Cush and Ham, and back through Naamah to Cain. And they are not cursed. They are simply, they have a tradition. Their temples portray Mother Earth. We're all going through this state. It's part of the mysteries. And when the two become one again, we'll have both the temple of the Jews and the temple of the Greeks or the pagans. They'll be one again. And the marriage will be complete. And the kingdom of heaven will be upon earth. I guarantee it. I'm going to go ahead and go, guys. Hope you have a wonderful evening. The Lord will bless you. He loves you so very much. He loves everybody. Every single person. His grace and his peace will be with you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.